Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Emerald City Creatives. I am so excited to be sitting down with Moet. Moet and I met back at one of my earlier art exhibitions at the Subrizi Paints Gallery in Pioneer Square. And what really blew me away was Moet's collage work. Um, we're going to dive into this in the podcast, but one of the pieces reflected a bit of her dad, and there was one that had like some jean texture to it as well. And then Moet also sold art at that show, and so it was a great introduction for us being able to work together. What was really cool, what I remember though, is one of the artists that she really likes was Travis Johnson, who is also my cousin, and that's how we first met. As she came to the art talk with him. And I don't think it was even planned. Like you even knew that he was going to be there. You were just coming to the art talk only to realize, oh, he's here, and this is kind of one of the places where his art's based. And so it was really cool, just the way the universe works together. And since then, Moet has collabed and helped me with writing grants, has really helped me stay motivated as a curator within Pioneer Square. And then just seeing all the stuff that you're doing out there within the arts community has been amazing. And so I want to welcome to the show Moet. And Moet, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a creative, your style, and what's going on in the world around you right now?
Yes, well, thank you so much for such a beautiful introduction. I feel so
Yeah.
honored. But yes, I feel like we just recently met, and that was around the same time I was getting established as an artist, with you giving me my third and fourth opportunity to exhibit work. And so since then, I feel like so much has changed in how I view myself as an artist or a creative or a community member. Um, I think yeah, I mean, I do create collage art, I do share it, but at the base of everything, I feel like I'm a historian who utilizes a canvas as an accessible way to share a message. So just knowing I have a story to share, I have creativity, and I'm able to express that, that is really meaningful. But when I consider like being an artist or being a creative or a curator and all of these things, it's so hard to label yourself and put yourself in a
Yeah.
box when you're just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm a creative, I'm a community member,
Yeah.
and that's the best way I can label myself if I must. I do utilize collage art as my main form, or my main expressive medium. I have used paint, but that's not where my skills lie the most. I'm not trained. I definitely feel like I'm a folk artist and I make folk art for regular people, just to share our stories and express myself. But yeah, I use it as a resourceful way to share history.
Yeah, and one of the things I kind of want to, I know that's one of the conversations we had when you, my cousin, met, was you said that you're a newer artist, fresh on the scene, but we're also looking at it, and then I'm not going to go off my resume because mine's still pretty fresh too. But with Travis, he's been in the game for about over 20 years and is like an art professor. But we both looked at your work and we're like, no, you're showing up. You're saying you're new, but you're fully realized as an artist. Um, because you weaved in stories so well, even to how you thought about the way in which it was applied, where you're pulling your source work. Even the fact that you asked the artist before using the source work, I was like, other artists aren't really doing that. So you showed up like fully realized, fully established, and then when you brought us into the history and the story of your work, that's what really just blew our minds, and also in a way that we kind of resonated with too. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you got your start as a historian and how you got your start in art?
Yes. So I am originally from Oklahoma. I've lived in a few places now, obviously based out of Seattle. I moved here after living in Dallas for about a decade. I went to college in Iowa, but my roots are in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My family's been there for centuries. And I just remember growing up, going through K through 12, I think in the fourth grade, that is when we kind of transitioned to having social studies classes. And so I remember as far back as then when they started incorporating more social studies, more history, learning about the indigenous history of the state that I lived in, that I was from, and going on to learn just world history. all of the histories and everything has a story. And when you have any question in the world, you can just look to the record and see whatever we're experiencing today. I can go back and find what directly led us here. And I definitely think that history is part of the story, but there's so many, I mean, disciplines or practices that go into considering. So, history, philosophy, anthropology, just all of these things. And so, when you take a little from here and there and you piece together this web and just see this like larger work, I feel like piecing things together directly translates to my collage practice. Just taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and seeing how it fits together to create this larger picture for people to understand what we're trying to communicate here. Um, I have always been just naturally talented when it comes to social studies. I remember being in high school and having the highest grade, honestly, middle school and high school, having the highest grades in our history classes, getting awards for them, and just knowing like this is something that I really appreciate and I really want to be involved in. And so even from a very young age in middle school and high school, I was going to museums, I was going to cultural centers and archives and really just engaging with this whole world outside of the traditional K through 12 education that most people follow. So that's something I'm really grateful for is I've been establishing this foundation of a historical interest and a cultural preservation focus for it's crazy to say over a decade, and I'm only
Yeah.
25. So, yeah, this is just something being interested in it, knowing my histories, and staying involved and engaged. I majored with history and I majored with criminal justice, so I saw myself going to the legal field, but that's not something that worked out for me. I actually had a job opportunity to work for the Department of Justice, and I ended up turning that down. And just the next week, my involvement in our art scene here in Seattle was basically established and just blew up. So, uh, I still am able to engage with history as a practice, but not through those rigid avenues that keep me from being able to express myself. I'm definitely happy I found this way to share my perspective and my voice while still adding to the culture and the work.
Nice, awesome. And there is something to be said about the fact that, yeah, oftentimes the way we explore and go through history, especially within academia, can be a little bit rigid, and it doesn't necessarily follow the way that stories are passed down from indigenous or black or minority groups. And so it's really cool to see someone engaged in the work in a way that it's not just engaging in it in a fresh way, it's engaging it in a way that's coming organic to you. And it's also weaving together other people's stories to show how we all come together. And that's what I loved about it. There is a piece that you did, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on the title, it was called The Last OG
It was called
or
OG.
OG. Okay. I am confusing that with the TV show. Um, I am so sorry, but it's called OG. I believe that was in homage to your father, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I'd be happy to share more about that. That is the piece that you referenced. I did utilize some work from the artist Travis Johnson, who I met at your gallery. And that was such a beautiful moment, being able to meet you, meet him. And I really left so inspired from the conversations that we shared. The piece itself, as a collage artist, I do utilize like the materials I have on hand. I'm actually really proud I haven't had to spend too much money sourcing my materials because I just use magazines that I already have. The stranger magazines, the public display magazines around town that are free, I pick those up every month and that is the basis of the materials I use. I have moved forward with starting to maybe print things off at the library or if I go to the art store and just buy one sheet of a color because I'll need it. But for the most part, especially when I was first getting started in creating, I was utilizing those magazines. And Travis Johnson was featured. So he had a piece. And I don't know why I can't remember. I almost think it was called like grills or golds or something. I may be misspeaking.
Yeah.
So sorry, Travis, that I can't remember. But there was a picture of a face that he drew of a black man who is smiling with his gold grill. And I saw that and I said, that is my dad. And it was just beautiful to find this piece that truly brought my vision to life. And so that piece means so much to me. It means so much that Travis is such an essential part to that piece. When I was able to meet him and connect with him at that artist talk that you hosted, it was incredible to see the ways that our personal histories overlapped. My the piece itself is depicting my father sitting on a cow, and it says original as a header and cowboy as a footer to speak more to our history as Black cowboys in Oklahoma. But knowing that Travis also had uh, a lot of his work features Black cowboys, and he also has ties to Oklahoma with his family moving from Oklahoma to California, and knowing I have ties. I mean, centuries of years in Oklahoma, but also my personal family history does have a piece associated with California as well. And so just so many synchronicities, so much coming together. It was so meaningful. And so this is really a full circle moment being able to come
Yeah.
back after I really did. I was first starting when I first met you guys. And since then, so much has opened up to me in my life. And this is just, yeah, really special to bring it all back together.
Yeah. Which I just remembered, and I should have said this earlier before we start recording. He told me to tell you hi. Um,
I'll have to reach out. I know I haven't spoken to
yeah.
him in a while, so thank you for
Oh yeah,
sharing.
no, he's still talking very highly of your work. He remembers everything. I was just talking to him. I think it was last weekend when I was telling him that I was going to be talking to you about the podcast. And so as soon as I mentioned you, he's like, actually no, he mentioned you. It was the other way around. Because we were talking about something else, and he's like, oh, how's Moet doing? I was like, oh, so um, so just to let you know, he remembers your work, and it left an impression.
Thank
Um, what I wanted to talk about is there was a couple of pieces that you had on your phone where you would snap photos of, and then you would compile them there, and some of them tied directly into um, Oklahoma. I think it was Tulsa's history, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how what stories or what periods in history speak most to you, and if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. Okay. I think I'll start this. I'm going to divide this in a few different ways. So, first, acknowledging digital collages, and then acknowledging what history inspires me, and then probably ending with how that goes into my work. So, I do now utilize paper and like physical materials when creating my collage, but I did first find my creativity with digital collages. So, just going around town taking pictures of my daily life. Anyone who follows me on Instagram, jazzy.historian, you will see I love to take a flick. So just being inspired by the world around me and again, piecing everything together to create something more expressive out of it. I was just taking pictures of my day to day. So the piece you've mentioned about Tulsa, yeah, that was just a time being at home, walking around the city, taking
Yeah.
pictures of different landmarks and pieces of art that inspired me. I know there was a Black cowboy in the piece. I know there is a significant cultural museum. The Philbrook Museum is in that piece. I have a reference to the Black Wall Street Times walking through downtown, that storefront. Also, indigenous artwork. And so, yes, just when I look at it, it says me. And so, uh, knowing that I see myself in the world around me and I stay inspired that way, just finding a way to communicate that with others. And so that's how I started finding my creativity utilizing digital collage. Going back to what histories and what stories do I keep centered with my education, I I majored in history. I'm an American historian. I specialized in the antebellum, Civil War, and Reconstruction eras, so 1820 through 1877. And I have a small scope on the colonial era, essentially the study of slavery in our society and keeping Black stories and Black narratives uplifted. So just keeping that at the root of my practice as history as a discipline, engaging it with it more formally. But then there's always our personal histories that we have and those legacies that get passed down orally that may not be part of the larger narrative. I may not be able to go to the library and pick up a book to read about these things, but I know that they've happened. They still live within us and our families and our generations. And so, yeah, keeping Black history and Black experiences centered, uplifted, looking to find old stories to share in the present and finding ways to contribute to what our future will be with those stories.
Yeah, and that's very cool. And something that you mentioned is the narratives that aren't written down but still live within us. I personally, I encountered that. I was trying to make gumbo for work, and it's a traditionally people say it's like Cajun Creole, but it's a dish that actually I found out originates in West Africa. And so I'm like, oh, so this dish my dad I grew up eating because my dad would make it. I'm like, oh, this still ties to our roots. And he specifically made it with okra, and I was like, oh, okra comes from Africa. It's heavily like I think that is a translation for gumbo is it means okra. So I was like, oh, this is a way that our culture has survived the test of time. Sure, it's kind of mixed with other cultures, but it's still rooted in our own. Um, and so hearing you talk about how you're looking at the ways that it manifests itself, even beyond the written history, is just amazing. Something else that stands out to me about your work, which I think is really cool, is you talked about that you're not really having to pay for materials, you're using found materials that are there. And a lot of times, I forgot where at in the South, but there are different rooms that they'll find that have been sealed off due to time. And what they'll find is that there are different, this is probably a horrible analogy, so please just go with me. But what happens is people have these old houses, and so they'll have mice or things there. And so over the years, and I'm talking centuries, mice will like steal things and take them back to different holes. And what they'll do is when they uncover these old pieces of house that have been boarded up, they'll find it. And when they find it, they'll find clothing or different things that belong to slaves or people that live there that are perfectly preserved because no one's touched them. And so it's really cool. And it says something about the way that our stories are able to make themselves manifest despite the active way that we try, sorry, not we, but society and power has tried to hide them. Like they're gonna come out some way or another. And so the fact that you're able to channel that and bring it forward and bring it out into art, and be able to tell it through your lens versus an academic who's divorced or separated from it, is just it's amazing because it's right on with what's happening right now in like the historical world and society. So yeah, thank you for that. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I do want to share with everything you just said and everything we're talking about resourcefulness of materials, making something out of nothing, using what you have, preserving and sharing stories, even when they're not like written down explicitly and just still being able to communicate our histories and our legacy. I want to share, I actually just did a presentation for a clothing company and I was their featured expert historian. And I did a presentation, it was called Stitching Legacy, and it was about Black quilting traditions in America, the way we used them to share our stories, even when we weren't able to write those down, the way that it allowed for community and that it brought ownership back to Black people who created the textiles, created the fabrics, created the dyes, processed all of them, grew them, were the seamstresses for the households, never had any ownership over these things. So once they started quilting, that just represented a new agency and ownership over the things that they created and how Black creativity has always shared our stories, how it continues to share our stories. And I easily connected that into Black expression as a whole, Black dandyism, Black Wall Street, where I'm from. We haven't really gotten to that as much. And um, just the basis of the clothing store, its mission really runs on longevity of materials, usefulness, resourcefulness, and so it was really easy for me to make those connections. But yeah, I feel like even as I started, it's so hard to define myself because am I an artist? Yes. Am I a historian? Yes. Am I supporting galleries? Yes. And I just see how all of these things go together and just the importance and need for us to share our stories. Especially through public history.
Hmm.
That's my focus as a historian, knowing that the average the average American, at least, only gets history in K through 12 settings. Even when they go to advanced education practices, they're majoring in what they're majoring. They're not studying history, and so public history as an emphasis on sharing history beyond the classroom, outside of academia, and getting these stories to the average person in ways that are accessible, which is really the root of my practice as an artist, but of my practice as a historian.
I love it. That man, that is so needed, especially as you and I both discovered within Pioneer Square, looking at the history just that's contained within that space too. But I do want to go back to a period of time that you mentioned, the Tulsa Race Massacre, that I think really is dear to a lot of um, Black people's hearts because it represents one of the few sanctuary cities we had in the U.S. I think there was probably about 23 or so that were systematically destroyed. But this is the one that we've seen it on um, Lovecraft Country. We've seen it featured there. There was another show where it was featured, and even I myself, like growing up, I've heard it mentioned, but always in whispers. It wasn't until recent history that it's actually been like, hey, the cat's out of the bag. The secret that they tried to keep is here and present in people's faces. So could you tell me a little bit more about Tulsa, and a little bit more about your experience growing up there? Yeah.
Yeah. So right now, today, my parents live in the segregated neighborhood, the neighborhood I grew up in, that was the safe haven for Black people who were surviving the massacre, who were fleeing Tulsa and needed a safe refuge. Um, with the state of Oklahoma not becoming a state until 1907, I believe, the end
Mhm.
of the 1900, or not the end of the 1900s, but towards the
Yeah.
end of the first decade of the 1900s. My grandfather had already established a church in this neighborhood by 1906. So just knowing, like, we've been in Oklahoma before it was a state. We've been in this neighborhood 15 years before the massacre, and just knowing how foundational that land, that history is to my direct lineage. We still live there to this day. I'll be back
Yeah.
home this upcoming week. I'll be home for 2 weeks. And so that's where I'll be going home to, the segregated neighborhood that the survivors of the massacre fled to. So just knowing that Black Wall Street was the most affluent, or one of the most affluent, successful areas for Black people in the US, there were $50 million in damages, which were never repaid through insurance claims because it was said to be a Negro uprising. And
Hmm.
knowing how systematically the government brought 10,000 white people and empowered them, gave them weapons, gave them deputy badges to enforce the law as just white civilians, because at the end of the day, we see it in our present day. The law isn't the written law and what matters. The law is whatever white supremacy wants it to be, and molds it to be in that moment with enforcement. So knowing that, yeah, 10,000 white civilians in Tulsa were deputized to police all Black people in the area, knowing that white people rounded us up in mass and put us in internment camps, and we weren't allowed to leave internment camps unless a white person vouched for us, and we had a pass, like a slave pass, to be off of the plantation in 1921.
Yeah.
This is just the history. But as much as you saying you've only kind of been able to engage with it more recently, heard it brought into the present more recently, it's the same for Tulsans. It's the same for
Yeah.
Black Tulsans. I mean, even as recently as 2020, in the past few years with this anti-DEI push, the former state superintendent of education made it illegal and called it critical race theory to teach about the Tulsa Massacre. In my
Hmm.
Oklahoma history class that I took as a freshman in high school, I didn't even remember learning about the Tulsa Massacre. Um, I talked to someone from that class about it. They said that they remembered it at least being mentioned, but what I remember is we had an opportunity as students to go on a field trip, and to go on a field trip, you had to write something. You had to write about a topic that explicitly wasn't covered in class, and what I wrote about was the Tulsa Massacre. So
Okay.
if I'm writing about something that wasn't covered and it's the Tulsa Massacre in my Oklahoma history class, who is supposed to learn and know about the Tulsa Massacre if it's not even
Hmm.
taught about in the education system where it took place? At the same time of the 2020 George Floyd protests, there were, and that was the same time it was kind of being featured in Watchmen on HBO and
That's
Lovecraft
another one. Yes.
Country.
Yeah.
Yes. In 2020, 2021, I was seeing my educators from my school district saying, I'm 50 years old. I'm 60 years old. No one ever told us about this. I've lived here my whole life and I never knew this happened. And I'm 50 and 60 years old and an educator. If
Yeah.
I, as an educator in the community, don't even know this occurred, who's going to teach about this? But it really does just go to show that it wasn't allowed it was very taboo to speak about the massacre for at least the first 50 years after it happened. So it's
Mhm.
not until the 1970s that we start to see it being publicly acknowledged in newspapers in the area. So outside of that, we also know, or we as Black Tulsans have known through oral history passed down, not anything that's been written, that there were mass graves of Black people from the night of the massacre around the city that were just
Mhm.
built over, and we travel through and go on through our daily life like everything is normal, as if we're not walking on literal graves. And so it wasn't until I think 2022 maybe that they finally excavated. There's actually a two-part or two-episode documentary on Hulu that speaks more about that, based out of Tulsa. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very intense experience as a Black Tulsan, even still in the present day in the shadow of the massacre over a century later.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to, and I want to focus on you, but I am going to tie it in because it's funny you touch on this because I don't think you've heard it yet, but the podcast I just published with Travis, we talk
Yeah.
about the subject too, where it is policy as violence, and some of the things that even when I was learning about the Tulsa race massacre is even the fact that they called it wasn't always called a massacre, it was called a riot because by calling it a riot by policy they didn't have to pay, and that was insane. And then, um, although it was oral history for the Black residents there, for them to voice it or put it out there, it could be met with violence, like physical violence. And so we see that it's not. Here we are. It's over a century. I think the last survivor just passed away from it, um, and it's actively being covered up. And it just goes to show that our history, no matter how far behind we say it is, or far in the past it still has implications on today, because that land was unlawfully taken and seized, and therefore should probably be given back to no, not probably should be given back to the rightful owners and the descendants. And yet, one thing that stood out to me in that Hulu documentary was the city leaders, which I'll point out have predominantly been white. Um, we're still like, we don't know what to do. What do we do? I have no clue. And it's like, fix the wrong and give the land back to the people in which it was stolen. Sorry, that's me. I don't want to like, but
No,
that's how
I
I felt about
agree. And especially,
it. But
well, first off, I will need to watch
yeah,
Travis's episode. Thanks for referencing that. But yes, definitely policy as violence. I mean, when you are in Black Wall Street in the present day, I actually have a picture that I took one day just walking through there through Greenwood, and it is still resonates with me so hard. So the picture that I took, I was taking a picture of essentially the overpass, the highway that they built through
yes.
with public domain to take the land so that
Hmm.
Black Tulsans wouldn't get that land back and it would be government or city property. So there's the overpass going over, and like right behind the overpass is the Driller Stadium or the One Oak Field, where they created a baseball field, and that was another way that they took that land to have white people start encroaching in Black Wall Street. It's known that within Black Wall Street, it was so self-sustainable that a dollar may have changed 10 hands before ever leaving the Black Wall Street district, which is only a few blocks before entering the white economy. And so just having America's game, more white people in the space, going to baseball games, and then how that develops the space and the land, and having that overpass. And then shortly outside of like this actual spot, just up the
Mhm.
street, though you can see it from where I was standing, there is an OSU hospital and like education center. OSU Medical Center, and it's kind of like education focus, I believe. So in the picture that I shot, there was actually like a police car or a security car from the hospital driving through. And I was like, wow, like just the fact that I'm standing in deep Greenwood historical Tulsa and I'm just take a picture and it really shows violence through policy. We have policing, we have public domain taking the land, we have the baseball field encroaching and taking the land for white audiences. And yeah, that's something I took that picture a few years ago or maybe early February of last year, and I still think about it all the time.
Yeah, and the thing is, Tulsa sadly wasn't the only one. I mean, there are so many. One that was recently on pop culture, in the TV show Harlem. I'm not sure if you saw it, but one of the backstories is Seneca Village, which is now Central Park, and New York just paved completely over it, um, and then it's now one of the most affluent parts of the city. And then even closer to home for me is we have Allensworth, which is another black sanctuary city that through policy had water rights taken away, and then the people ended up having to leave just through the policy and the way it was governed in local government, to where now it's more of a historical site than it is a city. Um, and this keeps repeating, and then sorry, I don't want to go too far into it, but it keeps repeating, and then we have different people saying, "Oh, why aren't Black Americans doing this?" I'm like, every time we have done this, um, which we still are, by the way. There's still super wealthy black cities and towns that are just on the hush. Um, but every time we've done it, it's come in and been destroyed. And so I'm bringing it back to you to see that in the artwork, to see that in found materials and collage in a way to where we can see that it's not a one-off. And another one of the narratives of, oh, it's just a fluke. It's a one-off incident. No, the way you collage things together is it ties back to what's going on modern day. It ties on to the history, and it also ties on to ways we see it in other parts of culture. At least that's what I'm getting whenever I look at your work. And so I don't think a better medium for a collage artist to also be a historian, because it literally pulls at the fabric of what we're dealing with today in society. Sorry, so I just want to kind of gush a little bit more on, on what I love about your art.
Thank you. No, and I mean I appreciate everything you said. And like you said, it's not just one place. It happens way too often and we just aren't told these stories. We're not allowed to know these stories.
Mhm.
It's by design. And even when you think about 40 acres and a mule. So many people,
Yeah.
they can reference this, but they can't dig as deep as I wish they could. The concept of like, after slavery, we should be given 40 acres and a mule to have that kind of stability, prosperity, start our life, and that tangible wealth and ownership. And everyone's like, that dream was never delivered upon. And that's kind of where I feel like the general person into
Yeah.
that story, when I don't feel like that's the complete story. Because if you
Not.
go back to Sherman's orders, people were given that land. People were given, I think it's 240 miles, about 30 miles wide, coastal land from what, Florida or Georgia, the Carolinas and Florida, just like along the coast,
Hmm.
240 miles up and down, about 30 miles wide. That's now some of the most expensive millions of dollars of property from on the coast, and that was our land, and then it
Yeah.
was taken from us, and that was delivered upon, but it just was retroactively taken back.
I love that we're
So
going there. Yes, let's keep it going,
yeah,
because people don't
it's
talk about this enough.
even thinking about, I mean, I mentioned Tulsa, you mentioned Seneca Village, also considering Philly, even as
Hmm.
recently as the 1980s, the move bombings and how police and law enforcement bombed Black communities in the city. in the 80s. That's not even, I mean, that's like, that is
Yeah,
not far removed at all. That is
that's a
not far
whole.
removed at all.
That's literally an elder millennial's age. That's not long at all.
That's not long at all.
But
And thinking, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, but to tie it back, yes, even the way that Tulsa, um, Black Wall Street came to be, and then some of the other, there's a lot of just like black towns in Oklahoma, which is what I love, but a lot of the other black towns came to be the same way. Not necessarily 40 acres and a mule, but it was a form of reparations after the Trail of Tears when they were freed from slavery for those. This was indigenous persons who happened to have slaves. And I want to call out that was a way for them to assimilate into the culture so that they were not also persecuted. So there was a difference there. There was a dynamic there. But um, one of the things is once they were moved to Oklahoma, they were supposed to give certain parts of the land to former enslaved peoples. And then what happened is the United States came in through taxes and things like that. Newly freed people are not going to have money. They're going to need at least a couple of crop seasons to get things going, but the land wasn't the most fertile. If I understand the history of Tulsa correctly, and then they found oil there, and that's what ended up making money for them and allowing them to become Black Wall Street. Um, and again, Tulsa is not unique in that it happens so many places. Going back to that strip of land you were talking about, the Gullah Geechee people have worked so hard to keep their place because the system is still trying to take that little bit of land from them. Sorry, I didn't want to, but yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I appreciate everything you've said. And as you've mentioned, indigenous people held slaves, and then those slaves were freed, and then they were given land, and then that land was not actually given to them, and they were not actually able to have what they were promised. And that is literally my family's experience. I'm a Black Cherokee freedman. My ancestors, Charlie Rogers, Houston Rogers, Agnes Rogers, these were all people who were enslaved by the Will Rogers family, which is the most famous name in Oklahoma. He was the most famous Hollywood actor at his time. He has the toll roads named after him, the international
Hmm.
airports named after him. He has his own museums in Oklahoma and in Texas. He has his
Hmm.
own state park named after him in California from the time he spent there as an actor in Hollywood. And he also has his own high school named after him, which is where my father graduated from. So knowing that the man who enslaved our family is where my father graduated from, and actually in the piece that we've mentioned earlier, OG with the
Hmm.
original cowboy, my dad sitting on a cow, that is him. It's the with the face from Travis Johnson. The
Hmm.
outfit that I've pictured him in is an actual outfit that he has, and he's customized from Ralph Lauren. That's all he wears, but it is in his alma mater colors, the Will Rogers colors. So going back to Black Dandyism, expressing yourself through creativity, reclamation, ownership. What does it mean to assert your humanity? The fact that he, as a Black man in Oklahoma, with our family legacy, a descendant of Will Rogers who enslaved us, can graduate from that school and rep those colors and just say, like, yeah, I am from the Rogers family. I am from the Rogers legacy. This is my legacy, and I'll rock it. And we do come from Black cowboys, and that is our history. And we are Black Cherokee freedmen. And we have a letter from my great great grandma from where the land she was promised as a Cherokee freedman was taken. She writes to Congress, and Congress is like, I don't know what to tell you. You don't have the
Hmm.
land. Figure it out. And that is that. And that's our history, and that's our legacy. And that is what I really channel in my work. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I love that you share that. Because again, it resonates so much. There are things I think when we first talked in my own history that I didn't realize were a byproduct of that. I am going to have to edit that out or leave it in. Um, and it wasn't until you told me your story that I realized that even within my own family, I'm not sure if this happened around the time I met you or a little bit after, but I found out that the land I grew up on, even in my hometown, some of it was owned by my great grandfather, and the school district I was a part of was sitting on that land, and I didn't know that this entire time, just because policies and time has taken away from us what we have been able to, all those markers that we they are going to create a legacy and allow us to leave something behind for the next generation has systematically been taken. Um, and the fact that we're able to reinvent ourselves and just keep going is amazing. Um, and I don't want to move on from this topic too soon, but there is an element of like spirituality in that, that there is like an enduring spirit and the ability to kind of keep going. And so I know you mentioned you want to talk about that too, and I want to use that as a transition to kind of open up that world and that door.
Yes, thank you. That was perfect. If you didn't transition to that, I was. Literally the last sentence you said of being able to reinvent ourselves through that. I mean, I almost feel like if you've ever seen Avatar: Last Airbender,
Hmm.
and he
I
goes
have.
into his avatar state, and every avatar before him is there for him to still connect with and talk to and learn from, but it is him. That's how I feel we are. That's how I feel I am with my ancestors beside me,
Mhm.
and I am the culmination of every life experience that they've ever had, and all I have to do is go within to meet them and learn more about that. And so, yes, spirituality is a big part of my practice. I actually did not have my creativity until I found my spirituality. And so that is I know before we even started the call, I mentioned I'm feeling much more like an introvert these days, just really
Yeah.
trying to have my energy and protect it. And that is the biggest part that keeps me inspired is being connected to myself, which in turn means being connected to my ancestors. And in turn gives me my energy, my spirit, my passion, my creative drive, and keeps me inspired to share these stories, to know that I'm here with a purpose, for a purpose, and they're here with me through it along the way, and that I'm here to share stories. And yeah, I feel like spirituality is a big part of my practice, and just having my peace and knowing that I'm here to share these stories, and that's all I have to do is be myself, share them, and be received.
Yeah. No, and that's so true. I think of all the legacies that I could have been left, it is that deep, that root spirituality that I get from my family. Um, Without kind of going too much into it, because I don't know how far into it you want to go, but I know even with my family, every year we would gather and the elders of our family would pray over the next generation, and then they just kept it going. And they let me know that even if they passed on, that's what they're leaving behind. And it's something about that, the fact that systems can't take that away, um, that I think allows us to endure. And even when I'm at my worst or my lowest, I know I still have someone praying for me. I still have someone looking out for me. Even in their death, they're like, we're still here. Like we're still like you have that avatar state. Like you have that to reach back to. We're not going anywhere. Um, and so yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other part too.
No, well, I love that, and I am not a science girl, I'm a glam girl. I just learned this acronym: galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, so I'm not
Yes,
a
you
stick
are.
I'm a glam girl. But something that I do know about science is that science says energy is never created nor destroyed. And
Hmm.
so if we have this positive energy spoken over our lives for generations and generations, then it's here and it will never die and we will always have it, which is why we will always have our ancestors and ourselves and even our future selves. If our energy never dies, then all we have to do is align with that energy that is ours to have and to walk in. And so, yeah, I definitely think ever since I found my spirituality, I am more spirited. And another like strong spirit is the spirit of Tulsa. When you go through the Greenwood, um, oh my gosh, why can't I remember the name? The Greenwood district created a Greenwood museum dedicated to the Tulsa massacre. It's called Greenwood Rising. That's what it's called. So Greenwood Rising. When you go through it, I think at the very beginning or in the first like kind of section, there is a big emphasis on the spirit of Tulsa and how even directly in response to the massacre, Black Tulsans were not scared. They didn't necessarily feel like they needed to run from their city. And it's actually a lesser known fact that following the massacre, only a few decades later, Black Wall Street actually hit its peak. And so it was able to rebuild and it was able to become more prosperous. And that is a lesser known fact that isn't necessarily shared, is that it still goes to show the narratives and how they are expressed. They want us to think we accomplished so much and then it was burned down. And now what are we going to do, and stay in this position where we feel hopeless and helpless? And so just knowing even that aspect of there is a better side to the rest of the Tulsa Massacre story. That's not all that it was, and that's not all that it is destruction. And it's really embodied by the spirit of Tulsa. And so I feel like I have that spirit. The spirit of resilience is the spirit of Tulsa, in my opinion. And so, I mean, I'm Oklahoma born and bred. So
Okay.
that is everyone in my line has had that spirit of resilience. And to know I'm the culmination of that, I'm really blessed and grateful.
Absolutely. And I appreciate this time with you because it's allowed me to better place even like my own narrative, my own family's history within Oklahoma. Um, I realized there's usually a question I ask at the start of every episode. And so I'm going to ask you that question and then I'm going to ask you the final question. The first question is, as an artist, what word would describe your art practice right now?
Right now, what word? I mean, can I say inspired? I don't know. I
Okay,
feel
yeah,
like
absolutely.
that is the word that I have for myself. I feel like I'm inspired. I'm ready for whatever there is to come. I'm appreciating every moment and taking what I can out of every moment to just build the life that I want for myself. And yeah, I'm inspired to discover what is to come, knowing that this is still just the beginning for me.
Nice. Awesome. And then what I like to wrap it up with is what song summarizes your artistic practice?
Mm. Well, the song that's coming to my head is called, I think it's called "Fruit of the Spirit." I
Okay.
could be wrong. It's by Jay Electronica, and
Okay.
I actually no, I have to I'm gonna look, I wanna be right.
Oh, yeah. No worries. And then I'm also going to include this in the show notes and then as well as like your Instagram and where people can find you.
Oh, nice. Okay,
So
yes,
it's
I
all going to be
just
there for you.
it's called Fruits of the Spirit, and when I first heard this song, there's a line at the end, and it says it's definitely a very, like, more political, Black
Mhm.
focused song, and so at the end, there's a line that says, oh my gosh, I think it says, "The dreams of the slave are the wings that carried us," or maybe "The prayers of the slave are the wings that carried us. A field full of dreams is where they try to bury us." And
Mm,
so that was
yeah.
really impactful and moving, and knowing, like, yes, like, as we just mentioned earlier, there is someone who has prayed over my life and blessed me, and they want the best for me, and I will always have that. And just knowing, like, if it was up to the world, they would leave us in that field full of dreams, 6 feet under, and that would be our story if it was up to them. So knowing
Mhm.
that I have my ancestors and they've written my story, I'm writing my story, and that I still get to see and create and make my story day by day. Yeah, just inspired
Yeah.
and living off my
I
ancestors'
love it.
prayers.
And just to touch on that too, just to give you that little affirmation is you're not just telling your own story, but you're reviving their stories from that field in which it was supposed to be their endpoint, and you're bringing it and letting them live through that and keeping them alive. So, one, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I want to thank you so much for sharing your art and what you do because it's given me life. It's made an impression, as you know, on my cousin, and I'm so excited to see what you do next. I see you out in the community engaging with people, and I'm so excited to see the way in which you engage with them. Um, for everyone who's listening, I want to thank you so much for your time. You can find Moet McClain online on Instagram. All those links and everything will be in the show notes. And please give her likes, give her follows, and stay tuned for what's coming next within the art. Thank you all so much for your time today, and have a great one.
Thank you.